What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest legends sits down for what should be a friendly morning interview, only to have the host push buttons that should never be pushed? What you're about to witness is one of the most uncomfortable, tension-filled moments in morning television history. This isn't your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This is John Travolta, a man who's spent decades mastering the art of the Hollywood smile, finally reaching his breaking point on live television. Before we get into this absolute train wreck of an interview, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me which side you're on after watching this. Because trust me, you're going to have opinions. Now let's dive into what happened when Michael Strahan decided to go off script. The interview starts innocently enough. John Travolta walks onto the Good Morning America set, with that classic Travolta charm we've all come to know over the years. He's there to promote his latest film project, something he's genuinely excited about, and the studio audience greets him with warm applause. Michael Strahan stands up, shakes his hand, and they both sit down as the cameras roll. Everything seems perfect for what should be a straightforward promotional interview. Michael Strahan opens with a smile and says, "John, great to have you here this morning. Your new film looks incredible, but before we get into that, I want to talk about something that's been on everyone's mind. You've had such an incredible career, spanning what, 5 decades now?" John nods, still smiling, and responds, "Well, thank you, Michael. Yes, it's been quite a journey, and I'm grateful for every moment of it. This new project really represents where I am as an artist right now." But Strahan doesn't let him finish that thought. He leans forward slightly and says, "Speaking of journeys, your career has had some interesting ups and downs, hasn't it? I mean, you went from being the biggest star in the world to, let's be honest, some rough patches. How do you deal with that kind of fall from grace?" You can see John's expression shift almost imperceptibly. The smile stays, but something changes in his eyes. He takes a measured breath and replies, "I wouldn't characterize it as a fall from grace, Michael. Careers in this industry ebb and flow. That's the nature of the business. What matters is the work, and I've always been committed to doing quality work regardless of where I am in the public perception." Michael Strahan doesn't back off, though. He presses forward with, "But come on, John, we're all adults here. There was a period where people were writing you off completely. The projects weren't landing, the reviews were brutal. That has to sting, right? Especially when you've been at the very top." John shifts in his seat, and his voice takes on a slightly harder edge as he says, "Michael, I appreciate the question, but I think you're oversimplifying decades of work into a narrative that frankly isn't accurate. Yes, I've had films that didn't perform as well as others. Show me an actor who hasn't. But I've also had incredible opportunities to work with amazing directors and tell stories that mattered to me. That's what I focus on." The audience is starting to sense the tension now. There's an uncomfortable energy building in the studio. Strahan seems to notice, but instead of pulling back, he doubles down. He says, "Okay, fair enough, but let's talk about some of those choices. You've made some films that critics absolutely demolished. Do you ever look back and think, maybe I shouldn't have done that one? Maybe I should have been more selective?" John's jaw tightens visibly now, and he responds, "Every actor has projects they might approach differently in hindsight. That's called growth. That's called learning. But I stand by my body of work as a whole. I've taken risks. I've tried different things, and yes, not everything has been universally praised. But I'd rather be someone who takes chances than someone who plays it safe and boring." That last word, boring, hangs in the air with clear intention. Strahan catches it immediately. He says, "Boring? Are you saying that actors who make safer choices are boring?" John leans back and replies, "I'm saying that I've never been interested in just collecting paychecks and doing the same thing over and over. I want to challenge myself. I want to explore different genres and characters. If that means occasionally falling flat on my face, so be it. At least I'm falling while trying something." Strahan nods slowly, but his expression suggests he's loading up his next question. He says, "Let's talk about the personal side for a moment, because your career isn't the only thing people discuss. Your personal life has been under intense scrutiny for years. There have been rumors, speculation, tabloid stories. How much of that affects you when you're trying to work?" Now John's demeanor changes completely. The professional smile is gone. He leans forward and says, "Michael, I came here to talk about my film. I came here to discuss the craft of acting and the story we're telling. I didn't come here to be interrogated about tabloid gossip and speculation. What does any of that have to do with the work?" Strahan holds up his hands in a gesture that's meant to be placating, but comes across as condescending. He says, "Hey, I'm just asking what people want to know. You're a public figure, John. People are curious about your life. That's part of being famous." John's voice rises slightly, controlled but clearly frustrated, as he responds, "There's a difference between curiosity and invasiveness, Michael. There's a difference between legitimate questions about my career and digging into personal matters that have nothing to do with why I'm sitting in this chair right now. I've been doing this long enough to know when someone is trying to create a moment rather than have an actual conversation." The studio has gone remarkably quiet now. Even the crew members seem frozen, unsure of how to handle what's unfolding. Strahan shifts tactics, trying to regain control of the interview. He says, "Okay, let's refocus then. Tell us about the new film. What drew you to this project?" But John isn't ready to let it go that easily. He says, "No, Michael, I think we need to address what just happened here. You invited me onto your show, presumably to discuss my work, and instead, you've spent the last several minutes trying to bait me into defending my entire career and personal life. That's not journalism. That's ambush television, and I expected better from this show." Strahan's expression hardens now too. He responds, "John, with all due respect, these are questions that your fans and the public have. I'm giving you a platform to address them. If you find that uncomfortable, maybe that says more about the validity of the concerns than it does about my questions." John actually laughs at this, but it's not a pleasant sound. He says, "Oh, so now we're doing armchair psychology? You're going to analyze what my discomfort with invasive questions says about me? This is remarkable, Michael. Truly remarkable. In all my years of doing press, I've sat through some tough interviews, but this is something else entirely." Michael Strahan leans forward, his own frustration starting to show as he says, "I'm just trying to have an honest conversation, John. If you can't handle honest questions, maybe you shouldn't be here." The words hang in the air like a challenge, and you can see John Travolta processing them, his face going through a series of micro-expressions before settling into something cold and determined. John takes a deep breath and says slowly, deliberately, "Maybe I shouldn't be here." "You're absolutely right about that, Michael. But let me tell you what's really happening here. You're not interested in honest conversation. You're interested in creating a viral moment. You want me to lose my temper on camera, so you can have a clip that gets shared across social media. Well, congratulations. You're getting exactly what you wanted." Strahan immediately jumps in and says, "That's not what this is about at all, John. I'm doing my job as an interviewer. Part of that job is asking the questions that others might be too polite to ask. If you've been in this business as long as you say you have, you should understand that." John's voice rises now, not quite shouting but definitely elevated, as he responds, "Don't you dare lecture me about how long I've been in this business. I was doing interviews before you even knew what a camera was. And yes, I've answered tough questions. I've sat through challenging conversations. But there's a difference between tough and disrespectful, and you've crossed that line repeatedly in the last 10 minutes. The studio audience is completely silent now. You could hear a pin drop. Even the camera operators seem unsure whether they should keep filming. Strahan, to his credit or perhaps his detriment, doesn't back down. He says, "Disrespectful? I've been nothing but professional. I asked about your career trajectory, which is relevant. I asked about public perception, which is relevant. These aren't gotcha questions, John. These are topics that anyone following your career would want discussed." John leans forward in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests, and says, "You want to talk about professional? Let me tell you what's not professional. Inviting someone onto your show under the guise of promoting their work, and then spending the entire interview trying to tear them down. That's not professional, Michael. That's exploitation, and it's beneath what this show is supposed to represent." Strahan's jaw clenches and he replies, "I'm not tearing you down. I'm asking you to be real with the audience. People respect authenticity. They want to hear celebrities admit when things haven't gone perfectly. There's nothing wrong with that. John actually stands up at this point, not to leave, but clearly to assert himself physically in the space. He says, "You want authenticity? Here's some authenticity for you. I came on this show because I respect the platform and I respect the audience. What I don't respect is a host who thinks he can use me as a punching bag to boost his own ratings. You're not interested in my truth, Michael. You're interested in your narrative." Strahan stands up as well now and says, "Sit down, John. You're being dramatic." The words hang in the air like a lit match near gasoline. John's face flushes red and he says, "I'm being dramatic. You spend 20 minutes attacking my career, questioning my choices, implying I'm some kind of has-been, and when I finally push back, I'm being dramatic. That's rich, Michael. That's really rich." Michael Strahan tries to regain control and says, "Nobody called you a has-been. You're putting words in my mouth. I asked legitimate questions about the natural evolution of a long career. If you took that as an attack, maybe you need to examine why you're so defensive." John points a finger at Strahan now and says, "There it is again. That condescending tone like you're talking to a child. I'm defensive because you've been offensive. It's really that simple. And the fact that you can't even acknowledge what you've done here, the fact that you're trying to flip this around on me, tells me everything I need to know about your character." The tension in the studio is absolutely palpable now. Strahan's co-hosts, who have been silent throughout this exchange, look like they want to be anywhere else in the world. Finally, Strahan says, "My character? Now you're attacking my character because you don't like my questions?" John's response comes fast and sharp as he says, "I'm not attacking anything. I'm observing. I'm responding to what you've put in front of me for the last 20 minutes. You want to dish it out, but you can't take it when someone stands up to you. That's not journalism, Michael. That's bullying with a microphone." Strahan's face hardens completely now and he says, "I'm going to give you one more chance to sit down and have a civil conversation about your film. If you can't do that, then maybe this interview is over." John laughs again, that same bitter laugh from earlier, and says, "Oh, now you want to talk about the film? Now that you've gotten what you wanted? Now that you've provoked a reaction? No, Michael, I don't think so. You had your chance to have a real conversation. You chose this path. You own it." Strahan takes a step closer and says, "I own it. What exactly do I own, John? Asking questions? Doing my job? If that's what you think I should apologize for, you're going to be waiting a very long time." John matches his energy and responds, "You know what the saddest part of all this is? You actually believe you're in the right here. You actually think that what you've done is acceptable. That's what's truly disturbing about this whole situation. You have no self-awareness whatsoever." Michael Strahan's voice rises now too as he says, "Self-awareness? You're standing on my set, on my show, insulting me and my integrity, and you want to talk about self-awareness? You come in here with this entitled attitude like you're above being questioned, like you're somehow special, and then you have the nerve to call me a bully." John takes a step back, his hands up in a gesture of disbelief, and says, "Entitled? I came here to do you a favor, Michael. My publicist told me your show wanted me. I cleared my schedule. I showed up on time. I was prepared to talk about my work, to be charming, to give your audience something worthwhile. And you repaid that by turning this into an interrogation. So yes, I think I'm entitled to be upset about that." Strahan shakes his head and says, "A favor? You think coming on Good Morning America is doing us a favor? Let me tell you something, John. We don't need you. This show has massive ratings with or without you. You need us. You need this platform to sell your movie. So don't act like you're doing anyone any favors by being here." The studio audience gasps audibly at this exchange. John's face goes through a series of expressions: shock, anger, and finally something like pity. He says quietly, "There it is. The real Michael Strahan, not the smiling former athlete, not the friendly morning show host. The ego that's been lurking underneath this whole time. Thank you for finally showing everyone who you really are." Michael Strahan's eyes narrow and he responds, "You want to talk about egos? You're John Travolta. Your ego has been the subject of Hollywood gossip for decades. You walk around like you're still the star of Greece, like it's still 1978 and everyone should bow down to you. Well, newsflash, it's not 1978 anymore. John's voice drops to a dangerous calm as he says, "You just can't help yourself, can you? Even now, even after everything that's been said, you have to take another shot. You have to try to diminish me one more time. What is it about me that threatens you so much, Michael? Is it the longevity? Is it the fact that I've actually earned my place in this industry through decades of work, while you're still figuring out how to transition from sports to entertainment?" Strahan's face flushes now and he says loudly, "Threatened? By you? That's absolutely ridiculous. I'm not threatened by anyone, least of all someone who's been coasting on past glory for the last 20 years. You want to talk about earning your place? Let's talk about how many of your recent films went straight to streaming. Let's talk about how you're barely getting offered theatrical releases anymore." The studio has gone from silent to buzzing with shocked murmurs. One of Strahan's co-hosts finally tries to intervene, saying, "Guys, maybe we should take a break and—" But John cuts her off and says, "No, let him finish. Let Michael tell America exactly what he thinks of me and my career. Let him show everyone what happens when you come on this show expecting professional courtesy. Please, Michael, continue. What else would you like to say about my recent work?" Strahan seems to realize he's gone too far, but instead of backing down, he pushes forward and says, "I'm just stating facts. John, your last 3 films combined made less money than a single weekend of some of your earlier work. That's not an attack, that's mathematics. And if you can't handle people pointing out objective reality, then maybe you need thicker skin." John's response comes measured and cold as he says, "You know what, Michael? You're absolutely right. My recent films haven't been massive blockbusters. Some of them have been smaller, more personal projects that I chose because they meant something to me artistically. And yes, some of them went to streaming platforms, which is where the industry is heading anyway. But at least I'm still choosing projects based on artistic merit, rather than whatever pays the most or gets the most attention. Can you say the same?" Strahan bristles at this and says, "What's that supposed to mean?" John smiles, but it's not friendly, and says, "It means that I see you, Michael. I see someone who's desperate to be taken seriously as a broadcaster, as an interviewer, as more than just a former football player with a nice smile. And I see someone who thinks that tearing down people who've actually built lasting careers in this industry is the way to establish yourself. But let me tell you something. That approach might get you viral clips, but it won't get you respect." The words land like physical blows. Strahan's face goes through a rapid series of expressions before settling on barely controlled fury. He says, "You don't know anything about me or what I've built. I've worked incredibly hard to get where I am." John nods and says, "I'm sure you have. But working hard and being good at your job are 2 different things. And what you've demonstrated here today is that you're not good at this job, Michael. You're good at antagonizing people. You're good at creating conflict. But you're not good at interviewing. There's a skill to making people feel comfortable enough to open up, to tell real stories, to give audiences something meaningful. You don't have that skill." Strahan's hands clench into fists at his sides and he says, "You're going to stand there and tell me I'm not good at my job? You're going to critique me when you just spent the last 30 minutes losing your composure on live television? Do you hear yourself right now?" John takes a deliberate step forward and says, "I hear myself perfectly clearly. And I'm saying what someone should have said to you a long time ago. You're a bully who hides behind the excuse of tough journalism. You're someone who mistakes cruelty for honesty. And you're someone who clearly has unresolved issues that you're taking out on your guests. That's not my problem to fix, but it is my right to call out." Michael Strahan looks directly into the camera and then back at John, saying, "This is unbelievable. You come onto my show, you insult me, you question my professionalism, and somehow I'm the bad guy? America is watching this right now, John. They're seeing you have a complete meltdown because you got asked a few tough questions." John laughs sharply and says, "A few tough questions? Is that really how you're going to characterize what happened here? You came at me from the moment I sat down. You questioned my relevance, my career choices, my personal life. You did everything possible to get under my skin. And now that I've responded, you're shocked? You want it authentic, Michael. This is authentic. This is what happens when you push someone too far." Strahan spreads his arms wide and says, "So you're admitting you lost control? You're admitting that you couldn't handle a standard interview?" John's voice goes quiet again, which somehow feels more intense than the shouting as he says, "What I'm admitting is that I'm a human being who reached his limit with your disrespect. I spent 50 years in this business being professional, being gracious, playing the game. And you know what? I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people like you who think that because you have a platform, you can say whatever you want without consequences. Well, here's your consequence, Michael. You just burned a bridge with someone who's been nothing but respectful to this industry for half a century." Michael Strahan's expression shifts slightly and he says, "Is that a threat?" John shakes his head slowly and responds, "It's not a threat. It's a fact. You think Hollywood is a big place, but it's actually very small. People talk, people remember, and what people are going to remember from today is that you invited a guest onto your show and systematically tried to humiliate him for ratings. That's your legacy from this interview, not mine." Strahan's jaw works as he processes this. Then he says, "My legacy will be fine. I stood up to someone who thought they were above criticism. I asked the questions that needed to be asked. If that makes me the villain in your story, I can live with that." John picks up the microphone pack clipped to his waist and starts removing it as he says, "The questions that needed to be asked? Who decided they needed to be asked, Michael? You? Did you sit in some production meeting and decide that what America really needed this morning was to watch you take shots at John Travolta? Did that feel good? Did that make you feel powerful?" Strahan watches him remove the microphone and says, "What are you doing?" John hands the microphone pack to a nearby crew member and says, "I'm leaving. I'm done with this. I came here in good faith, and you violated that faith repeatedly. I'm not going to stand here and continue to be your punching bag while you pretend this is journalism." Michael Strahan takes a step toward him and says, "If you walk off this set right now, everyone is going to see you as the problem. You'll be the celebrity who couldn't handle a real conversation. Is that really how you want this to end?" John pauses and turns back to face him directly. He says, "I want people to see exactly what happened here. I want them to see that I tried to maintain my composure. I tried to redirect the conversation multiple times. I gave you every opportunity to be professional. And you chose confrontation every single time. So yes, Michael, I'm walking out. Not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I refuse to participate in whatever this was." Strahan calls after him, "You're making a huge mistake." John stops at the edge of the set, turns back one final time and says, "The only mistake I made was thinking you had enough integrity to conduct yourself with basic decency. I won't make that mistake again." And I'd suggest that future guests watch this interview very carefully before they agree to sit in that chair. Michael Strahan, now clearly trying to regain some control of the situation, addresses the camera directly and says, "Well, there you have it, folks. John Travolta, ladies and gentlemen. We tried to have an honest conversation and, well, you saw what happened. We're going to take a quick break, but you can hear John's voice from off camera saying, 'Honest conversation? Even now you're spinning this. Unbelievable.'" The camera catches Strahan's expression as he hears this, a mixture of anger and something that might be embarrassment, before they cut to commercial. The damage is done. The interview is over, and the internet is about to explode. So there you have it. One of the most explosive celebrity interviews in recent memory. John Travolta walked onto that set as a professional trying to promote his film, and walked off as someone who'd had enough. Michael Strahan started the interview as a host, and ended it as something else entirely. Who was in the right here? Was Strahan justified in pushing for more honest answers, or did he cross a line that should never be crossed with a guest? Did Travolta overreact, or was his response completely warranted given the treatment he received? Make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What would you have done in John Travolta's position? Would you have walked out sooner, or would you have tried to stick it out? And what does this interview say about the state of morning television and the way we treat celebrities? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next video.